What's up? Welcome back. In this episode, we're going to talk about Jupyter. If you've looked around at some OpenAI or just general AI tutorials, a ton of them are in Python, understandably. Python is a great data science language. We're going to use Ruby though, and we want to use Ruby. But one of the amazing tools in the Python ecosystem, and a tool that you see a lot in a lot of these tutorials, is called Jupyter. So Jupyter is a way of collecting up different snippets of code and running them in cells. And so we'll look at Jupyter notebooks real quick. We're going to show how to install them and then how to work with them with Ruby. And we're going to just build on top of that. I think this will be a foundational episode because in future episodes, we'll use Jupyter as the base to go through and explore some data science stuff with Ruby. So the first step is to install Jupyter. So we're going to head over here. I like using Homebrew, even though it's the bottom of the list here. So I'm going to say brew install Jupyter Lab. And this is going to go out and install this with Homebrew. So Jupyter itself is like a handful of different tools. It gives you a web browser that allows you to interact with a kernel. A kernel is a little piece of software that knows how to run a specific programming language. A lot of times when people use Jupyter notebooks, they use them with Python. And so Python is the default kernel that comes with Jupyter. It turns out this is already built into VS Code, but it only has a couple of kernels in there. So it looks like maybe this worked. So let's see if we run Jupyter. Great. All right, so now we have Jupyter installed and we can say Jupyter notebook, and this will fire up a little web server, and the web server will automatically open at localhost 88. And here you can see I'm browsing around some local directories. If I wanted to, I could say, give me a new notebook. This is going to create a new file with the IPYNB, the IPython notebook extension. And by default, when I fire this up, I only have one kernel. That's the Python 3 kernel. So if I select this and I say, okay, yes, now I can do like some Python stuff, hello world. And what's cool is you've got these cells. And so we can click to add a cell. And we might say, I don't know, for X in range 1 to 20, print X. Okay, so then it just prints those out. Python has a bunch of awesome tools, and there's a lot of things in this ecosystem for displaying and doing all these visualizations and stuff. Very cool. But we don't want to write Python. We want to write Ruby, right? How do we install a Ruby kernel so that we can use Jupyter with Ruby? The folks over here at SciRuby have created an iRuby kernel that we can use while we're inside of Jupyter. The way that I like to install this is also with gem install, and then we're going to register iRuby. So we're going to come back over to our terminal. I'm going to stop the Jupyter notebook server. We're going to say gem install iRuby, and we're going to register it with -force. That does something with Homebrew. So we'll restart our Jupyter notebook here and fire it up. Very cool. And now we can say, let's create another new notebook, untitled 1. Now we have another kernel here. Start the other kernel, Ruby 3.2.2. Awesome. Very cool. So now we can do puts hello world. And we see hello world come out. That is so awesome, right? Now we can do things like, I don't know, let's create an array. And the array is going to be 1, 2, 3, 4, whatever, bad style. Now, when I create a variable in this cell, I can use it down below. So I can say a.each do X, I don't know, puts X, and then I can run this. I'm running it with Command Enter. There's different settings here, so you can set it up so that when you hit Enter, it will automatically go. But because I'm adding new lines, I want it to automatically run for me. One thing that is super annoying is that when you go to indentation here and you say, I want to use 2 spaces, it doesn't listen to you. So let's say I really want to use 2 spaces. Now let's like try to rerun this. So each do X. And when I hit enter, it still adds 4 spaces at the beginning. I want 2 spaces, people, 2 spaces. It's all right. Okay, so now I can run that and I still get, this is my output. This is my put S or my print output. And then at the bottom, I have the return value from this function call, which is A. So I see that there, right? Very cool. You can do all kinds of stuff, require, I don't know, you can require your gems in here as you would expect, and you can use those, which is pretty handy. But at this point, you might say, okay, that's cool. And that's like a great way to explore and play around with Ruby, but you just have vanilla Ruby at this point, other than maybe some gems that you install. Let's try require faker, and then we can do puts faker show. No. How about internet.email? Cool. So that's pulling in the faker gem and then printing out email addresses. That's pretty neat. There is this awesome gem called Jupyter on Rails. Go star and heart this gem. This thing is awesome. So it requires just installing a couple of different things, Jupyter on Rails and FFI RZMQ or CZ Top. These two libraries help us interact with 0MQ, which is a way that the Jupyter notebook is communicating with the kernel over WebSockets with JSON. And so these are just like a couple of other dependencies. So this is a gem that we're going to install. But first, let's make a new Rails app. So we'll say Rails new Jupyter fun-t database is PostgreSQL. Okay, please cd into Jupyter fun and bin dev. This should fire up a server. And we can go to localhost 3000 and see a failure. Rails db create, db migrate. That'll fire up some database stuff for us. Okay, so now we've got our Rails application, Rails G scaffold article, and we'll give it a title and a body. In the body, we'll have some text. And yeah, we'll just start with that. And this is like the standard Rails demo, right? Rails db migrate. That will migrate our database. Go to our routes file. We've already got resources, articles. Fantastic. So now if we go to /articles, we should have a way to create a new article. And we're going to say test and test body, create article. And now we're coming back to our list of articles. Very cool. Now let's install this gem, Jupyter on Rails and FFI RZMQ. Now I only want these gems to be installed in development mode, probably. So I'm going to just drop them in here. I don't know. If you want them to be in production, you'll probably want to lock some stuff down. I have no idea whether or not these things are production ready, but they're fun to play with. Install. So we'll fire these up. I'm going to kill the server while that is installing. Now, it installed a couple things. I'm not sure what Packable is, but DARU. This is like data analytics for Ruby. It's the like Ruby's answer to pandas. And it gives us things like data frames and some other stuff for doing data analytics. Very cool. Some very cool integrations between Jupyter on Rails or Jupyter and Daru or Daru. Am I saying that right? Who knows? Okay, so now what we can do is Rails Jupyter :notebook. This is a command that we get from the Jupyter on Rails, gem that fires up a Jupyter notebook for us. And you'll notice that we're inside of our Rails app. Very cool. All right. So now if we say new notebook, the kernel that we pick is we can pick a kernel based on our Rails application. I don't know the difference between one with sandbox and one without. So we're just going to create the one without sandbox there and say select. And now we can do stuff like article.all and hit enter. And now we see this article that was stored in the database. Very cool. Awesome, awesome stuff. So fun. And now, I don't know, let's just say like pluck title or something, right? Gives you back the title. Very cool way to play around with these things. And the other thing, or like one of the things, again, that Jupyter on Rails gives us and Daru gives us is article.toDF and I thought it was df. Yeah, that should have, I wonder why that didn't work. Maybe we need to, all right. So this is a Daru data frame. So I needed to install a couple of things, a couple extra things. So it turns out that I needed to install the matrix gem. I think when I was experimenting, I was using a different version of Ruby that had matrix built in, and now we have to install it. So whatever, by installing the matrix gem, that fixed the Daru data frame situation. So now we have Daru data frames. So there's a bunch of cool stuff you can do with this. So we can say df is equal to this thing, and then if we wanted to create a new cell here, we can mess around with the df.index. I think indexes maybe, or index tells you what the index is, and then you can like key into that index and it'll tell you stuff about that. So I think right now it's just like keying into the different columns, but data frames, there's lots of cool data science-y stuff you can do with those. So that exists to df when you're inside of the Jupyter notebook. So let's play around a little bit with OpenAI and the OpenAI Ruby gem here for a second. So I'm going to bundle add this, bundle add Ruby OpenAI, and then I'm going to open up an initializer here, and we'll say openai.rb. And I am going to I'm just going to set my access token in rails.application credentials OpenAI key and have that configured globally. So I can say editor is Rails credentials edit, and I'm not going to set an environment. And here I'm just say OpenAI key, and this is where I'm going to set my key. If you're trying to follow along at home, go grab your OpenAI key and drop it here. All right, now that is set, from inside of our Jupyter notebook, we should be able to do something like say client. I don't know if I need to restart this actually. Let's restart this since we changed the initializer. I don't know how those were reloaded or if they're reloaded at all. So I'm going to restart the kernel here by saying Rails Jupyter notebook. And then let's just grab a new one here and we'll say we want to use Jupyter fun. Okay, client is equal to open AI client.new. And then I guess I'm going to roll that API key. Okay, so if we go back over here to the docs, let's look at a completion endpoint or maybe a chat endpoint, and just see if this is working as expected. So we'll grab the chat example and we can just run it. Boom. So this is using 3.5 turbo and we got back a response. So the user said hello and the response was, hello, how can I assist you today? So this is like a standard OpenAI example demo going on here. But one thing that I thought might be cool just to experiment with this and show like a more realistic example is let's have it write a bunch of like dummy articles using function calling. So function calling is a feature of OpenAI that lets you pass in some structured arguments and tell OpenAI how you want your data to come back so that it can call functions. So let's create a new function here called create article, and maybe it's going to take in the title and the body. Okay. And this is going to say article is article.new title body. And then we're going to say article.save bang to see if we can actually save it. And that should be fine. So what we want to do is we want to tell OpenAI that we have this new function called create article and that we want back data that can be passed as arguments into our create article function. So in the example here, so if we look for function calling, we're going to pass some messages to chat, but we're also going to start passing some functions to chat. So here, what we want to do is we have our messages that we're passing to chat. Now we're also going to pass some functions. Now the function in our case is called create article, and the description is like creates an blog post for developers who visit cjav.dev or something. I don't know. Okay, and then the properties here, this is the properties of the object that we want returned and passed as arguments into create article. So we've got a couple of properties. We've got a title, and that is going to be like the short or like the concise title of the article. And we've also got a body. This is going to be also type string. And in this case, the description will be something like the content of the article, in markdown format. Okay, the required arguments are title and body. And we've got a temperature situation going on here, and I think that should be okay. Our spacing and indentation is all so whack. I don't like it, but whatever. All right, so let's just fire that off and see what we get back. Okay, so this is just the raw response from OpenAI. And we get back an ID, an object, some other stuff. And inside of here, we should get, I see, okay, hi there. How can I assist you today? So we actually want the content to be like, write an article about how to use function calling with the OpenAI API using Ruby. Follow the docs here. And let's just give it something. I don't know. I don't know if this is actually going to work. Yeah. For Ruby web developers. Okay. And here's our function, create article. Okay, let's just see. Is it actually going to do the function calling thing? Maybe. Their example is like use the weather API or something like that, but I don't know. Boom. All right, so now we got this response here. And in the response, one of the keys is function call. And the name of the function is create article. And the arguments is this big blob of arguments. And we've got a title here, using function calling with OpenAI in Ruby, Rails, and it's in markdown format. Look at that. Introduction: as a Ruby on Rails developer working with Rails, you may find yourself wanting to interact with blah, blah, blah. Fantastic. Awesome, awesome, awesome. Okay. In the docs here, there's also an example for how to extract the different bits and pieces. So we'll just copy that and add it below here. So we're going to pull out from the response the actual message that came back. And if the role, so here we see the role is assistant. If the role is assistant, and it is, and there is a function call message, then we want to grab the name of the function call that came out. So create article, and we want to parse the args as JSON. And then we're just doing like a quick switch statement on the function name. And if that's the right name, then we're going to call create article. If you are like a longtime Ruby dev, you know that we could probably make some meta programming that actually just calls the stuff under the hood. We don't want to get too crazy here, but this should call create article with the arguments as expected. Should we run it again? Let's just fire away, huh? So let's run this again. While it's working, this will show a star while the cell is like executing. And a lot of these OpenAI calls take a while. There's also really interesting things where you can like reference back cells. So here we see 5 and the output is true. That true is actually because article.saveBang is executing, and that is the return value of this whole evaluation. So if we were to go back over to our articles here and refresh, nope, we don't have the server running. Bin dev and refresh and go back to articles. Holy moly, look at that. Title, using function calling with OpenAI and Ruby. Here's the body. Sick. All right, look at that. That's even in Markdown and everything. That is awesome. What's really cool is you could imagine having a bunch of these methods. Maybe you create an article, create a category, create whatever your heart desires as little tiny JSON bits and pieces that you might want back from a large language model, an LLM. The other piece of the puzzle here is that I am starting to recognize a little bit of a pattern where I like to put my prompts, like the content that goes here, inside of view components, and then use those view components to render out the content of the prompt, and then using a job to actually execute these things in the background, and then write them into data that's in these models, and then use the data that's in the models to inform future requests by just like looking up relevant models that are related to those future requests. So we'll keep doing more and more with this OpenAI stuff, but this is how you set up Jupyter, how you can do some basic function calling. Hopefully that was useful. And yeah, we've got some exciting stuff coming down the pipe. I'm really pumped to play with GPT-4 Turbo, and yeah, excited to see what we'll be able to build with that. So Thanks so much for watching, and we'll see you in the next one. Cheers.